Hi everyone, welcome to Metaphysical Mining. I've got a special treat for those of you who know Jerry Marzinski and are familiar with any number of his interviews posted online. Not only do we discuss his book and his 35 years of research, but he talks for the first time that I'm aware of in depth on his experience with shadow people. And we're only at the tip of the iceberg, folks, as Jerry has agreed to come back for a second show and share everything he's got on how these shadow beings haunted him and his schizophrenic patients. But for now, here's a little teaser. Enjoy. We are officially recording episode 2. This is the Metaphysical Mining channel. My name is Michelle DeVries. It is Monday, February 21st, 2022, and my guest is a retired psychotherapist with over 35 years of experience counseling paranoid schizophrenics in state mental institutions, state prisons, and hospital emergency rooms. We have a lot to discuss. Welcome to the channel, Jerry Marzinski.
Good to be here.
Before I hit record, we were talking about a ton of things. Hopefully we can remember what we were talking about and bring that up. But just so everyone's on board, the reason for the channel is that it's a supplement to my academic career. I was recently awarded my master's degree in metaphysical science in December of 2021. And I established this channel so that I could speak with people like Jerry and talk about how I used his book and his research in the paper. Where did I use it? How did I use it? Why did I think it was relevant? And because we're constrained on time, Jerry, if it's okay, I'm going to jump into some slides and get this out of the way. It's a very top level overview of the paper, and that way we'll all be on the same page. Okay. The title of the paper is The Hidden Predator: Deconstructing the Shadow Side of Reality. And this is the official thesis statement. And then this highlighted portion is where, Jerry, your research and your personal experience actually fits in to the statement. And then when I go through the table of contents, the audience and you are going to see exactly where I inserted and used your information as well. So basically, the paper reveals the subtle predatory ruling intelligence that is embedded within the fabric of our reality and how humanity interacts with it, often with dangerous and even deadly consequences. I'll prove that just becoming aware of the shadow archetype of our reality can be a catalyst for an evolutionary growth process of the mind, ushering humanity into another plateau of awareness. And then I say, when you stand on this other plateau, you go through a paradigm shift and you realize that humans are not at the top of the food chain. And I'm sure that, Jerry, you can agree with that because you say that exact thing on page 140 in your book. And I'll get to that too.
Very true. We are not at the top of the food chain.
So I want to define what we mean by hidden predator. And this is an explanation of what I used in the paper. But then also, Jerry, if you could explain after I go through this, what is your definition of this hidden predator? Within the paper, I define the hidden predator as an independent, invisible, non-material, non-human, ancient predatory race that shares our planet, lives in a parallel reality, and exhibits a high degree of social and psychological agency. We probably won't get into this, but I do go through that there's a hierarchy. They have a defined set of rules of engagement because this reality is very controlled. There has to be checks and balances. When you enter this reality and when you interact with human beings, it has to be under control. That way, nothing gets messed up for them because our whole society is set up in a way that it benefits them. And if something's going to enter it, it better not mess up that benefit. Now, the reason why I say that is because it appears they're governed by laws that supersede our human laws. And the reason why I say that is because in the first part of the paper, it's the review of literature is broken into 2 parts, and you'll see that in a second. But they seem to be able to come and go as they please. They interact with us on their terms, essentially. And not only can they travel between our realities, but they can take us to their reality and bring us back if they want to. Sometimes they don't. And that's definitely not something that I'm aware of. I don't know if Jerry is, but I'm not aware of us being able to teleport or bilocate. That is a very brief description of the hidden predator in the paper. So, Jerry, if you want to give your definition from all your years of experience, what is your definition of hidden predator?
Well, the number one fits almost exactly. They are independent. They're invisible. They are non-material. They are of the energetic universe. They're not of the physical universe. And the energetic universe, there is no time, there is no space, and there is no material. There's no matter. They dwell in that universe. So they can hit a schizophrenic anywhere at any time, no matter where they go. I mean, they can go, to Antarctica and they can still hit them. Space and time doesn't matter to them. They are predatory. They can only consume negative emotional energy. They can't make it themselves. So basically what they do to us is like what we do to cows. They set us out, we eat food, we drink milk, we produce emotional energy. For them to take it, they have to turn it negative. And then they take that negative emotional energy and they suck it out of the people. So, schizophrenics will tell you they can feel their energy leaving. They can feel that they're drained after the voices attack them.
They have to make us edible first, because if you're in a good mood, that's not something that's edible.
No.
And so a bad mood. So it's like, I liken it to, we have different species on this planet that eat absolutely appalling and disgusting things, like a vulture. A vulture will sit around and wait for something to rot. That is what it finds palatable. Well, we have to look at this consumption in a different way, because this predator, it's terraforming this environment to get a product. From a business perspective, we are a commodity, and it has to alter us in the way in which it wants to produce this product. It has to make us ferment and be this disgusting, putrid thing before it's like the vulture, before we actually become edible. Is that correct?
Well, that's pretty close. What these things do, the schizophrenics call them the voices, okay? Psychiatry is going, there are no voices, these are hallucinations. So, I mean, that's bullcrap. That's total bullcrap. The schizophrenics have been trying to tell psychiatry forever that these things are very real. What they do is they're consistently negative, derogatory, insulting to the individual. They will jump on any negative situation and inflame it. And they're kind of like magnetism. You can't see the magnetic energy. You can see the effect. When you put that magnetic field under iron filings or in a jar, you can see the effect that magnetic field has on those iron filings. These things are pretty much the same thing. You can see the effect they have on schizophrenics, and they don't just get schizophrenics, they get all of us to different degrees. You're walking around, all of a sudden this horrible negative thought comes into your mind to do something you would never do, and it's shocking, and you go, where did that come from? That doesn't belong to me, that's not mine, but it upsets you anyway. That's an example of being hit by these things. But schizophrenics get hit constantly, all the time. They run these patterns that I sent you, and we've defined some 28 of them. If psychiatry would look at these patterns, they couldn't miss them. I mean, their hallucinations don't run patterns. So psychiatry, big pharma, are making a ton of money selling toxic drugs to drug the brain, which doesn't do anything except calm these guys down temporarily. As soon as those drugs wear off, the voices are right back again.
Right back there. Well, I'm glad you brought up that list. I'm going to go to the next slide, because we'll get into that when we get into the self-defense aspect of it and what you came up with in your experience. This is basically the table of contents of the paper: the introduction, review of literature, discussion, and conclusion. And then the review of literature is broken into two parts. And we were just talking before I hit record on how part one talks about the macro view of how this predator drills into and operates within our environment. And missing 411 cases, time storm cases, that's something that goes across the planet. It doesn't matter where you're at, who you are, you can be affected by this. And then part two is where I go into the micro. I go down to the individual. How is the individual dealing with this? And then the section where you and Sherry and Paulino are, you guys, in my opinion, are textbook examples of how this predatory archetype acts as a catalyst to push you into another state of awareness. You're forced to access the metaphysical environment so that you can survive. And that is essentially a paradigm shift. You're forced to see more of the matrix than the rest of everybody else does. So you are literally pushed out of, this bubble of this matrix, and you guys are floating in this other bubble as you're watching everybody else under this spell. You guys are out here dealing with the dragons that are coming and going between this main matrix, and everyone else is just completely oblivious to it. And that's why I look at your work as self-defense. It's psychic self-defense. You're warning people, I see these things, I see what they can do. I've come up with a scenario in which you can survive it and you can combat it. So that's why I lumped all of you guys together, and Paul Eno does the same thing. But you guys had to go through it first. In order to teach somebody about something and really know it, you have to go through it yourself.
That's right on, because when I was finding all this stuff, there was nobody I could talk to about it. I couldn't talk to anybody on the psych staff. I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't talk to my wife because she'd get all freaked out. Oh, you should be dealing in those things. Nobody except the schizophrenics. They were the only ones who understood what I was talking about.
I know, like I was listening to an interview of you once, and I'm like, this guy got up every day, showered, drank his coffee, kissed his wife, and he went to a prison and worked with schizophrenic prisoners. I got up every day and went to my cushy advertising job. You had wolves at the door. I didn't have wolves at the door. I was in this cushy environment. And then here's Jerry with these inmates that are violent criminals. And you were dealing with the human predators that are metaphysical predators were influencing.
I was fascinated with what was going on, but for years, I just got like pieces of the puzzle, and I go, one year I go, oh, well, I got this piece now. And then I got this piece now. And there were times where I just got so fed up with dealing with schizophrenic, after the 7 years at the state hospital, I got into a PhD program, and I'm finally, I can get away from these people. No more, because they were driving me nuts. I was determined to find out what was going wrong with them. And it was just one piece at a time. Maybe 1 year I'd get 1 or 2 pieces, and next year I'd get another couple of pieces. And I had all these pieces of the puzzle, and I was like, oh, I can't take this anymore. And then, after I got done that PhD bull crap, I was thrown right back in again. It's like some big hand goes, where do you think you're going, buddy?
Get back in there. You and Sherry were both fated to handle. It's like you came into this life with the level of maturity, the cosmic, whatever new age damn words you want to use, the cosmic universal maturity to deal with this archetype. I honestly am convinced that somebody like you actually came in with this knowledge, and now you were just remembering it. You were getting triggered by all these things, and it was cellular memory coming up. You were tapping into your human technology, and you needed this epigenetic trigger to happen. And you were like, okay, now I remember. Now I remember why I'm here and what I'm supposed to do. I know this predator, and I know how to deal with this.
I can kind of feel that, but I suspect I was drunk at the time I agreed to do this.
Exactly.
I mean, it's
that's
like,
how they were like, Jerry, this is what you're going to do. Have a shot of tequila and we'll talk.
It was unbelievable. I mean, just, But you
held your own. You held your own. And, like I said to Sherry, I said, Sherry, you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old when you were dealing with this archetype. I said, and look at the people Jerry was treating. These are grown men and women that couldn't hack it. And I'm not saying anything against them. I'm not trying to be condescending, but look at what Sherry was, a child, and she was swinging at this archetype and battling it. And look at how she came out. She's this warrior. And then, some of these people that you dealt with, they couldn't swim. They sank. They could not swim with this predator. They could not spar with this predator on the mat in the predator's dojo. And here comes Sherry and Jerry. You guys are just battling this predator your whole lives. While you're around people who can't hack it, you're trying to pick people up as you're swinging. You get a good punch in, somebody falls down, you try and pick them up, and you're still swinging.
Yeah. Well, thinking back on it, I had much more trouble with the prison administration than I did with psychotic killers. They drove me crazier than the prisoners did by a long shot.
All right. Well, let me bring a picture of your book up so that people know this is what you co-wrote with Sherry Sweeney, An Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind, Breaking the Spell of the Ivory Tower. I'll put all these links in the show notes so you don't have to stop and write this down. I'll make sure everything's down there. I'm going to stop share right now. We're going to get into what happened in the prison system. I want to read from your book. This is page, 69 through 71. This is the actual story that got me to say, this guy's in the paper. Okay. While working in the psychology department of the state prison, I was in close liaison with a specially chosen group of schizophrenic inmates. I collected information about their voices with the intent of destroying them if possible. The voices didn't like me prying. Several inmates told me the same. I found it interesting that their voices told me to shut up and leave my office, as I already knew too much, an odd behavior for what was supposed to be a hallucination. If the inmates refused to leave, their voices got louder and ordered them to attack me, which we will talk about that too. This situation occurred frequently and required much mutual trust. As methods to interrupt the voices improved, inmates began to report that their voices were growing increasingly upset with me. One of my patients, who was improving with the exercises given him, came to my office to tell me his voices were demanding to speak to me personally. This had never happened before. After getting over the shock, I asked what they had to say. His voice tone changed slightly, and these words spewed from his mouth. "You have no right to interfere with our way of life." This was not the patient who had spoken, which he instantly affirmed that wasn't me. It was at that point that my battered denial system completely collapsed. This is what got me. I could no longer pretend that the voices were not entities separate from the patient. An unshakable sense of dread came over me. I sensed I was treading on dangerous ground. And I actually put that quote in the paper. Stunned, I canceled my appointments for the day. My mind lapsed into a wild storm of thought and emotion as I tried to sort out what the hell was going on. Though I long suspected the voices might be real, I would not allow myself to fully acknowledge the reality of their existence. This is like you working through your paradigm shift. I could no longer deny that the voices were entities with a consciousness separate from that of my patients. This is your awareness expanding at this point. My theory that the voices were deranged figment of their subconscious minds had to be discarded. Whatever these voices were, they weren't anything good. A few weeks later, while reading a book written by a shaman, I came across a passage in which he spoke of the existence of invisible parasitic entities that fill our minds with negative thoughts and commands, then consume the negative emotional energy generated. I brought this book into my office, then called the inmate whose voices had spoken to me. I asked for his opinion about what the shaman had written. Shortly after I began reading the passage, he lapsed into a trance-like state. He stared at me with hollow eyes. Suddenly, my office walls began to resonate with a loud electrical crackle, similar to an arc welder, which is what a lot of people in time storms report. The crackling moved around the office, up the walls, across the ceiling, back down into a Rubbermaid trash can next to my left leg. I looked into the trash can, nothing was there. The episode left me terrified and uncertain of what else they could do. Until that point, I believed that whatever the voices were, they were stuck inside the patient and could not manipulate physical matter. It took me 2 months before my curiosity overcame my terror enough to call the patient back to my office. I asked him if he had heard the crackling that day. "I did, but it surprised me that you did," he said. "So what was that?" I asked. "They were the voices." "What were they doing?" "They wanted to scare you away." "Well, they did a damn good job of it." Where I previously viewed the voices as malicious, sinister, cunning, and sometimes stupid, they now left me feeling that they were capable of terrorism. And then you say, Sherry refers to them as entities, alien thoughts, sees them as disingenuous morons. The medical establishment insists that they are all hallucinations. Well, hallucinations don't produce electromagnetic fields that attack you. Does it take you back to that? And
well, it took me back, and I even got goosebumps because that's where my denial system completely fell apart. It was already tattered. I mean, anybody else would have probably went, "Hey, these are entities," years before. But at that point, it was like, boom, it went down. I was in shock.
That is your paradigm shift. That's why I chose you to be in the paper. You were the perfect person at the perfect time in the perfect situation. No one else could do this but Jerry Marzinski.
Well, I'm not sure anybody else would want to do it.
That again, it had to be you.
You got to be a bit crazy to do this.
It's like, exactly. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about someone that looks like a UFC fighter.
Well, the image of him is, he's a little bit overweight. He always was unshaven. He was one of the groups, and I didn't work like this with all criminally insane schizophrenic prisoners. It was a carefully chosen group. And the agreement was that I'll do everything I could to help them out, you know, in any way I could and work with them. But the deal was they had to tell me in real time when the voices were present and what they were saying.
Now, was this something that was approved by
Hell
like,
no. Get out of here. You gotta be, that's what they went after me for that.
Okay, I gotcha. So
You know,
you're basically doing this on your own, trying to help these individuals.
Right. And then when they found out that they were actually recovering, fully recovering, and wanted to go off their meds, that got the attention of the psychiatrist there, that this isn't supposed to happen. They're supposed to be schizophrenic for the rest of their life. And the meds are the only form of treatment. And here are these people completely recovering. Their voices are gone. They don't want the medicines anymore. And that came to their attention. And then I was put into an inquisition. They started putting me under investigation for experimenting with prisoners without the departmental permission. Basically, all I was doing was asking them questions, and they were going after me with a hatchet. And none of the prisoners I worked with gave them any information.
What are these crimes that these people committed? What level is this? Is this maximum security?
Well, I was doing this throughout all the different security levels I worked at. So they were different levels. And like I said, I was carefully choosing the people I worked with.
Yeah. Does this predatory archetype go after more of the violent when it's in the prison system?
Well, there are two factors, and these are founding factors for schizophrenia. One is intense physical, psychological, and emotional abuse. They're attracted to a negative mindset with negative emotional energy. And the other one is methamphetamine. More prisoners went insane on methamphetamine and stayed there than any other drug I've ever seen. It does something to the spiritual protection. It just blows it wide open and lets these things in.
So one of the MOs could be it looks for methamphetamines, which could go along with that theory where I say they need you to be rotting flesh. And meth would probably do that.
Like all I can tell you is the way it happens is so they start using meth for a while. They feel great. They feel like Superman. They have a lot of energy. They can get a lot of stuff done. They're just, you know, boom, 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 like Superman. And then one day they start hearing voices. Like it's allowing these negative entities in. It breaks down whatever spiritual defense the person has and allows them right in. So they start hearing voices. They go, oh, that's just a hallucination. It'll go away when I get off the drugs. And it does. And that might go on for months. And then one day it doesn't go away. They're hearing those voices
without
constantly,
the meth, right?
Without the meth, without anything for the rest of their lives.
It's like once they made contact, then they were almost tagged. Like we tag an animal when we track it.
Right.
It's like they were tagged and then they can just come back and feed off of this person over and over and over and over
and
again.
over. And what's even stranger is they would tell these meth patients, the voices would tell them where and out and when to be there. And if they showed up, the drug, somebody would come along with the drug. What was interesting is they knew stuff that the patient didn't know himself. And it was all for the destruction of the patient. So the patient, you know, a meth addict, he goes, finds meth, that's great. He's wonderful. Oh yeah, you know, they tell him which houses to rob and they get away with it. They love that, you know, even though they're thinking this is great, it's actually destroying them. The prisoners being destroyed through this love of meth and money and robbery and you know, they've shut down all the state hospitals. Then they throw them all in prison, you know, because how are they going to survive? They can't hold a job. So they rob people, they take stuff, they throw them in prison, which is the worst possible place. There's no treatment. They only give them antipsychotic drugs if they're causing problems. Otherwise, they'll lock them up and they're brutalized. The gangsters will actually force a psychotic patient not to take his antipsychotic drugs. Then they'll get this guy all paranoid and they'll say, hey, this guy on the rival gang, he's looking to kill you. You better knock him off first. So they'll send him like a human torpedo and then he gets a life sentence and he's in there for the rest of his life. The ones who don't get that way and eventually left out, or, you know, they do their time, their time's over. I've seen them release prisoners that I knew they would kill somebody in 6 months, but their time was up. Their death to society was over. So they brutalize these guys. They harden them in that environment. They get more violent. They get nastier. They get uglier. And then they release them on society because their time is up.
I do remember when I was younger, there were still state hospitals.
It started with Proposition 13 in California, where they went, hey, our taxes are way too high. We need to do something. What they did is they closed down all the state hospitals. So they go, oh yeah, we're going to institute mental health centers, and these guys are going to go to the mental health centers. No, they don't want to take those drugs. They hate those drugs. The voices hate those drugs, and the voices will tell them these drugs are poisoning you. And they'll point to the side effects of those meds, and they'll say, well, look, you got dry mouth, sexual dysfunction, you're nervous, you're all these akinesia, the shaking, the quivering, all these horrible side effects. And the voices say, look at that, the psychiatrist is poisoning you. And when I first got to the state hospital, I noticed that psychiatrists were getting beat up by schizophrenics at a horrendous rate. It wasn't anybody else. It was a psychiatrist. It wasn't the psych nurses. It wasn't the regular doctors. It wasn't the counselors or psychologists. It was a psychiatrist. And I didn't know why. I noticed it. See, that's what I'm talking. That's a piece of the puzzle.
You're seeing a pattern, and you're the only one that's like, everybody, what's going on here? Everyone's like, don't worry about it, Jerry.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
They go, well, that's just a symptom of schizophrenia. That's it. They blow it off. Nobody was curious about what was happening.
So what was the reason why they were being attacked? The psychiatrists.
Well, see, I didn't know that until after the 7th year.
Oh, wow.
So I noticed they were being attacked. I didn't know why. And I didn't know why they weren't attacking everybody equally.
Yeah, like the orderlies and
yeah. Well, they were attacking the orderlies, but at the same rate as they were attacking the psychiatrists. But the orderlies are with them 24 hours a day. The psychiatrists are there 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it was thinking, a disproportion,
and I'm thinking, what the hell is psychiatrists saying to these guys that are getting them to attack them in 20 minutes? It does not compute.
That's pretty astounding.
So this was my 7th year at the state hospital. I was about ready to go back to graduate school again. And there was one gal she was doing great. She was in cosmetology class. And if they didn't take their medicines back then, we knew nothing else. We knew nothing else. We were taught in graduate school, medicines are the only thing you can do for these people. Their brains are broken. They got a chemical brain imbalance. They made this up out of thin air. There's no proof of a chemical brain imbalance. It's a matter of fact, it's been staunchly disproved, and they're still pushing this bull crap to sell their toxic drugs. They don't care about helping people. They're caring about making money and just dumbing these guys. They're not looking for the cause. They're treating symptoms. It's bull crap. It's just total bull crap. The whole Western mental health center, mental health philosophy, it's crap. It's crap. So this one gal, she went off her meds for the 3rd time. We were about to discharge her because you're not staying on your meds. You're not going to be able to function. So her mother calls me and says, don't do this. I can't deal with her. I'll come up there. We'll talk to her. We'll find out what happened with them. And I felt so sorry for this mother that I said, okay, we'll hold up on it. Come on up and we'll pull her and we'll talk to her. So the mother came up. We brought the patient in. And, both of us are going, you were doing great in cosmetology. You knew that you're going to get discharged if you stop taking your drugs another time. This is the 3rd time, 3 strikes, you're out. And then we discharge you because you're obviously not going to cooperate with the medicine. And that's all we know to keep you sane. And I said, and the mother and I are both asking her, why did you do this? Why did you do this again? You've been warned before. You know what happens when you stop taking your drugs. You go crazy. You can't function. All this horrible stuff happens. Why did you do it? And she says, oh, you won't believe it. You won't believe me. I said, try me. I've seen a lot of weird things here. I said, it's going to take something real special to kind of throw me off the game. And she said, okay, the voices. The voices told me the psychiatrist was poisoning me. And they pointed to the nervous effect. They pointed to dry mouth and blurred vision and akinesia and twitching and all the horrible effects, and saying they're poisoning you.
Yeah. And now, was this the first time you heard somebody say the voices? Was that the first time?
Say the voices?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first time I heard that.
Okay.
I knew the voices didn't like the medicine. I knew that because that's the first thing they go after. Because what it does, the only thing it does is calms these people down. Remember, their game plan is to get them as upset, as feeling as guilty, as depressed, as rotten, every negative emotion that they can elicit to generate that negative emotional energy, which they then suck off. These drugs are basically major tranquilizers. They calm them down. It makes it much harder for the voices to upset them when they're tranquilized. And they don't like that because then they start starving. And on top of that, then they can start communicating and relating with other people. The voices don't want them to have any friends. They don't want them to have any families.
Yeah.
They don't
want them isolated.
They want
completely.
them totally isolated, so they can bash them and then drain them. That's the worst thing for a schizophrenic patient to be, is isolated, like they are in a prison.
Yep. Yeah. And I actually go into, I think it's the first, I can't remember what section it is, but Susan B. Martinez. She wrote the Field Guide to the Spirit World. She's in the paper as well. And she goes into a lot of depth about this isolation. And she does research into serial killers. She has a lot of really good graphs in her book mentioning how they were isolated because of this or because of that. And then they knew, they were trained to isolate their victims. It's like they were taught this behavior by this predatory force, and then they started mimicking it. So it's another form of behavioral science. They're teaching them how to perform, and then they're getting them to do these acts, and then they're feeding not only off of the person doing it, but also the victim as well.
Exactly.
And yeah, I don't know if you've read William Baldwin.
Yes.
So I have a bunch of books back there about the spirit attachment therapy and the spirit release therapy. That was going to go into this paper. I decided to put it in my PhD. But he was at the prison system. He was working with females. And he said he was doing a lecture and he was talking about how these spirits can cause you to do things. Yeah. And one of the girls came up to him at the end. I'll never forget it. It's like the one thing I'll always remember about his work. This female prisoner came up to him and said, do you think that these things can possess your body, commit a crime, and then leave? And he said, yes, I 100% think they can do that. He said, all this weight dropped off of her. She was like, I knew it. I knew for the life of me, I could not have ever committed that crime. The only thing she remembered was she was a severe drug addict. She was in a horrible situation, a drug house. She said, all I remember is I did whatever drug it was. I blacked out. The next thing you know, I woke up, I was on top of somebody and blood was everywhere. She said, I knew. She said, and it like, it's given me the goosebumps, because even though she was in this horrible situation, this horrible thing had done to her, she said, now I know my soul is at peace, because I knew I couldn't do that. And I knew I didn't do that. And I knew my soul didn't do that. And I was like, holy shit, how profound is that?
Yeah, I remember the first time I ran into that. It was a psychotic patient who was hearing voices before he got into the prison, and the voices had convinced him that they're after. They hate human beings. They hate them. They hate us. And they convinced him to drive out into the desert with a gun, and when he ran out of gas, to get out of the gun and shoot himself wherever he ran out of gas.
Oh wow.
Okay, so he gets his gun. He drives out in the desert. He runs out of gas, gets his gun, leaves the car, walks out into the desert, sits down on something, a rock, and cocks the gun, and he's going to shoot himself. And he said this bird came out of nowhere, and it's a bird that he never recognized before, and he lived in Arizona. He said it was just the strangest looking bird, and it started screaming at him. So what he said is he cocked the gun, he shot at the bird, and the blast of the gun woke him up. And here he is, he woke up with a gun in his hand, and he's going, what was I going to do? You know, It was like it's like the gunshot woke him out of that trance. So they actually put these people in a trance, and then they do this stuff. And a lot of them don't remember the horrible things they do. Matter of fact, I can put you in touch with a woman who's the mother of a psychotic killer. Okay. You know, one of her YouTubes is on my website, and she talks about what that was like. You know, with her, he killed, I think, 4 or 5 people. He murdered his girlfriend, cut her up into little pieces, and they still have not found her body. She's got videotape of him. It was her son. He's in a maximum security prison in Colorado right now. But she tells a story of what she went through with all that. She's got, he was completely taken over. You know, he was the voices, and that's what the voices try to convince the person to do, because you know we're taught from the time we're little kids that all the thoughts in your head that come into your head are you. They belong to you, that they are you. You know, but they're not. If you're the one who can sit back and listen to the thought, you're not the thought. You're the one
Yeah.
listening to the thought.
You're like the watcher, the
You're
observer.
the watcher. You're the
Yeah.
watcher. You're the observer. You're not the thoughts. And these voices come into these people's heads, and they're intrusive. They sound just like the person's normal voices, normal thoughts in their head, but their intent is very much different. So they start struggling with this. Like, what is this? What are these voices? And they'll come to 3 different conclusions. And the conclusion they come to determines what their chances of full recovery are. The ones who come out of it the best are the ones who keep the voices at arm's length. They go, I don't know what you are, but you're not me. You're dangerous. You're infesting me. You're telling me to do things I don't want to do. You're not me. And they keep them at a distance. The second most successful ones are the ones that don't know what the voices are. They don't know whether it's them or not them, and eventually come to the conclusion that they're not them. The very worst, the ones who succeed the least, the ones who stay psychotic for the rest of their lives, are the ones who believe friggin' psychiatry that these things are hallucinations, that their brain is broken, that they have a chemical brain imbalance, that they don't have any proof for, that the voices are hallucinations, voices that they've never studied, and it's a phenomenon they've never experienced. They just arrogantly get up there and go, we're psychiatrists, we're the priests, these are hallucinations because we say so and we went to college. God damn.
That's got to be
irritating
so
as hell.
Frustrating, because
it's frustrating.
You're
it's
like,
really frustrating. You
like
can't talk to them at all.
No.
They're gone. They're completely gone.
Well, thank God for you, Jerry, that you kind of dealt with all this and still stayed with a level head and just plowed through it. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Like I said, I must have been drunk when I agreed to this.
Okay, well, I do want to talk. I want to ask you some questions, because you brought up the physical symptoms, and then we talked about the environmental, the epigenetic type of things that can come in. I'm going to go through some of these time storms, some of the time storms data that Jenny Randall's compiled, and I want to see if it fits with what you've seen and what you've experienced.
Yeah, because I don't know anything about time storms.
My theory, and I'm paraphrasing what I believe her theory is that these predatory, like your parasites, we can separate them.
When you tell the patient they're parasites, they go nuts. They go absolutely crazy. You better brace yourself if you point that out.
Yeah.
They're being blocked from seeing that. And I remember times where I'd say, if you stuck your hand in a fire and you got burned 1,000,000 times, and every time you stuck your hand in the fire, you got burned, what's burning you? They had no trouble saying the fire. But I say, if you hear the voices 1,000,000 times, and every time the voices come, you're drained of energy, where's your energy going? Their answer was consistently, among hundreds of them, I don't know. They were being blocked from access to that information.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's like they're mind controlled. I say in the paper, this is an advanced form of behavioral science. This is almost like MK Ultra on steroids, because these beings have thousands of years of doing this. I mean, they've been growing us, cultivating us in a sense. This is a farm. I go through the different scenarios of rules of engagement, of how they interact with this reality. And it's like we're a lab, we're a farm, we're all these things all in one. And so if you want to come here as a predator and you're a scientist and you want to tag some humans and you want to monitor them, then you come through on a license. Like we have licenses to drive cars, we have licenses to hunt. They have to have a license to come in here, because this is a very controlled environment. This is a patented technology. It's very expensive. They don't want you messing it up. So if you come in here, you have to be approved to come in here and hunt as this predator. You have to come in under the license of snatch and grab. That's what I call one of them is snatch and grab. The other one's catch and release. And the other one is sink or swim. And your personal experience is a sink or swim. And that's where the predatory archetype works with you as a shaman, in a sense. They're working with the human being to develop them, to take them into a situation where you go through an alchemical transformation. Now, somebody that's in a catch and release, that would be the hierarchy up top, the echelon, which is more of our scientists, where they come in, they monitor the population, they make sure that we're healthy, that everything's okay. So they'll tag some of us. They'll manipulate the environment. They'll get you into a state they'll like literally these time storms, it's like a fog or a mist, and it'll come around and it can lift you up. It's lifted up cars. So imagine that in the missing 411, you walk into one of these time storms and you're gone. You go into their reality. They do whatever they want. They bring you back. They wipe you. They drop you. Sometimes there's been cases where people have been dropped. Some of these human mutilations, I've gone down that rabbit hole, which nobody talks about that. It's very much like the cattle mutilations, but it's human mutilation. So we don't even have to go there. But so with these time storms, I feel that these predators, they understand advanced science. They understand atmospheric science because they're manipulating the environment to physically take us and bring us back, or to put us into altered states of consciousness so that they can do whatever it is they need to do with us. And the witnesses in time storms, everyone's pretty much survives it. So their testimony says that they encountered a strange cloud, a storm-like mass, mists, luminous glows or orbs, fogs, vapors. And these are in different colors too. They're black, white, gray, green, yellow. It's the full spectrum. Temperature changes, that's big. Severe hot, severe cold. It's the full spectrum of temperature changes. Electrical odors, like when you're in an elevator and you're like, oh, it smells like electricity. Buzzing, humming, rushing sounds, electrical popping, which is what you had. The vibrations, change in pressure in the air, so much so that they pass out. People have literally passed out in time storms. One guy was on a motorcycle. He had leathers on. I think it was in Britain. And he's on a motorcycle and it's raining. So he's wet, okay? His leather's wet. He went through the time storm. It heated him up so much, he was dry. And his leather, you know how like when you heat up leather, it gets smooth? Mm-hmm. That's what happened. Thank God he had the leather on because he probably would have burned his skin. And other people do report radioactive type of burn, and they get a sunburn afterwards.
You know what that triggers me off is after I stopped working in the prison and went to work in the private sector in the emergency rooms doing psych crisis, I could feel these things. Even in my later years in the prison, I could feel when those voices were active, when they were angry. There was no other feeling like it. It was like this icky electrical feeling is the best I could put it. Mm-hmm. You know, and it had different strengths. So if it measured how angry these things were and how strong they were. So I could tell how angry they were and how strong they were by this icky electrical feeling that I had. And there were times where it was so strong, I felt it was going to just destroy whatever protection I had around me. I always felt like I had a field around me like Star Trek where they have that protective field. But boy, there were times where it was so strong that it was just pushed like a billionth of an inch above my skin. I'm like, what happens if it breaks through? And they couldn't fool me because I'd ask them, you've been hearing voices? And they'd say, no. And I say, oh yeah, you have. And this is how strong they are. And they're active right now. And the guy'd go, well, how do you know? Do you hear voices too? It's dangerous to talk to people about it. And that's what the voices say too. Yeah. You talk to anybody about this, they're going to lock you up and drug you, man. Nobody's going to believe you, So they said, don't talk about us. Don't tell anybody about us,
Okay, so another atmospheric thing is timelessness and stillness and silence. And some people in the missing 411 have reported that the birds stop, the insects stop. I know you're in a hospital, but have you ever physically felt an odd stillness because you are in, and especially in a hospital, it's very busy in emergency rooms. So did you ever feel timelessness or stillness at all?
Let me tell you, what you're saying triggers one event that I'll never
that's
forget.
why I'm bringing this stuff up.
It's like I was working in the emergency room, the county hospital. It was a Christmas Eve. I got stuck on the shift there in the ER, and it was pretty quiet. There wasn't a lot of stuff going on. And in comes this guy who is just shaking. I mean, he's just shaking. He's queer. He just doesn't stop shaking. And I pull him in, start doing a psych eval on him, and he said, well. He started telling me about the voices, and he said he's been using meth. I said, how long you been using meth? He said, I've been injecting meth for 10 years. And I'm thinking, like, you should have been dead, buddy. What are you doing still alive? I'm thinking in the back of my head. So I'm curious about this guy now, So I'm like, what's going on here? you know, which is something I always did. What is going on? Why is this doing? How come this is, you know, it's
yeah. How is he surviving this?
How is he surviving? So I started talking to him about the voices and the meth. And he said, yeah, I'm still using meth. I used it for 10 years. And I said, well, have you ever seen the shadow people? And he goes, yeah, I've seen the shadow people. And I said, what color eyes they have? Well, he goes, red. So these shadow people, the psychotics see them, methamphetamine addicts see them. They're usually human shapes, you know, and their eyes
like
are
silhouettes, you know, almost like a silhouette. Yeah,
like silhouettes are darker than the rest of the room, and they can see them at night. They can go through walls. Their eyes they either have no eyes, or their eyes are red or lime green. They can pass through walls, and they never talked, to the best of my knowledge. I haven't heard one patient in my whole career up to that point where they said they talked. And I'm asking this guy about his shadow people. And, you know, I run all the stuff by, and I said, have they ever spoken to you? And I figured, well, if they speak to anybody, they'd speak to this guy. And he said, yeah, they have. And I said, what did they sound like? And he comes up with this real screechy, you know, it's like, real screechy, you know, mimic. And it just sent shivers up my spine. And, you know, and then I started asking him, I said, what did they tell you? And all of a sudden his eyes changed. They became dark. And he went from shaking all the time, you know, quivering, he went stark still. And I'm looking in his eyes, and his eyes were dark, and it was like these pools of hatred that went forever. And this thing it wasn't him anymore. It was this entity that was just like evil as hell, that was looking through his eyes. And I'm looking at it. And one thing I knew is you can't show fear. So I'm staring at this thing, and it's staring at me. And I'm like, God, I can't take this anymore. And it seemed like it lasted forever. You know, and I'm staring in this, and it was these dark pools of hatred. It was just like this, this cold hatred that just went forever, and you could just feel it radiating out. And I'm staring at this thing going, holy shit, you know, and I'm like, how long is this going to go on? And then finally it breaks. And he goes back to shaking again, just back to his normal self. It didn't say a word during that time. He didn't say anything. It just stared at me.
It showed you. This is my theory, because of the work you've done, because this was this after the hospital and the prison?
This was after the prison, yeah.
Okay, so you were further along in your career when this, okay. So this is my theory. These predators, they have the ability to scan almost to your soul level. Whatever this thing was, knew that you had the authority, and that you have this authority. It's a frequency that you carry whenever you do this kind of work. And so they can scan that, they can see it, they can read it. Like you print something out and you read it. So when those experiences happen to you, because this doesn't happen to everybody, Jerry, this only happens to people like you that have the authority. He showed you what it was. It was a part of the initiation. He saw where you were at. You know, it's almost like they sent this guy to you. Do you feel like you're being sent? You have to be. It's being sent.
Well, it was weird because he was the only one that came in that night.
What are the freaking odds of that? You know?
Yeah, I never thought about that.
Yeah, so it's like you're being initiated. Here's the initiation spectrum. This is when you first get triggered on this side. Okay, you first get triggered. You're in college. You're like, what the hell's going on? The predator's like, oh, we've got a live one here. This is a smart guy. Let's work with him. Boom. They released the sink or swim shaman. He comes down, he works with Jerry over the spectrum. They totally rework your frequency. You go through this paradigm shift, and then you're starting to come to where you're fully initiated. Boom, cue that other guy in. Now he's got to see it. He's got to see the full possession. So you've seen all the different phases of how this predator interacts, the snatch and grab, the catch and release. You're a great example of somebody that basically went through the alchemical transformation and initiation of the predator archetype, because now it's literally showing you in your face, this is what I look like in full possession mode. 10 years I've had this person. This is what it looks like, Jerry. Take notes. And then he basically goes back to shaking.
He did go back to shake, but it wasn't over then. We weren't done with each other on that at that point. You know, I knew this guy knew stuff that I wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. You know, and after that first thing came, it shook me up pretty bad. But then he came back to his normal, and his normal was fairly congenial for somebody who'd been using meth for 10 years. So I asked him, hear these things, talk to them, which is the first time I've ever heard any patient in
they usually just scare the shit out of you and paralyze you, and they don't ever say anything.
They don't say anything. So this guy actually heard them, and if it was anybody was going to hear him, it was this guy who should have been dead 8 years ago. And I said, well, what did they after he came back and started shaking again? I got to ask this. What did they tell you? So he said, well, they told me to go jump in front of trucks and I wouldn't be hurt. And I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, I went out to the road and I jumped in front of two vehicles. And I said, well, what happened? He said, I was hit. I was thrown across the road. He said, I came to on the other side of the road, and the shadow people were surrounding me, and they said, get up, you're not hurt. And he said, I got up and I wasn't hurt. He said he did it again, twice, just to prove it to himself. He got hit again. And then that thing came back again. After he said the second time he got hit, then all of a sudden his eyes turned black again. He stopped shaking, and there was that thing again. And it was staring at me. So here was this goddamn steering contest going on. I'm looking it in the eyes. It's looking me in the eyes. And it's like this hatred. I've never felt a hatred like that before. It was just this deep, endless hatred that just seemed to go forever. And then I don't know, it seemed to last forever. And then all of a sudden, boom, it clicked off again. And I went, I'm done.
You're like, okay, I've had enough.
I've had enough.
I got to get a drink.
So the psych nurse came and got this guy. And then about 2 minutes later, she ran back into my office and she said, I can't deal with this guy. What did you get? So she could write her report. But that was one story with the shadow people. Another one is where a prisoner told me that he was experimenting with the shadow people to try to figure out what they were. So, the schizophrenics are curious about what the voices are. They don't know what they are. They don't know any more about them than most people. They're curious too. So they're asking all kinds of questions. So here's this one prisoner. They were doing meth. They saw the shadow people, and they were wondering if meth was necessary to see them. What they do is they get two guys, the prisoner that I was dealing with and his friend. They get their meth. They get into a pickup truck. They drive out way into the desert to an Indian reservation and go down this dirt road into the middle of nowhere. Then one guy injects the meth, and it's dark at this point. One guy injects, and he starts seeing the shadow people. So he goes to the other guy, goes, you see that one over by the tree over there? And the other guy goes, no, I don't see him. Well, what about that one over by the bush? You go, no, I don't see that either. So they determined that they needed the meth to see him, but that's that's not true. They determined that. And then what these things do, and I don't know why this happens, because the prisoners and several other prisoners told me the same thing. If they notice you looking at them, they start moving in on you. It's like they know that you can see them. So while they were doing that, the other guy then shot up meth. He injected it, and he started seeing them too. So he started conferring with the other guy, saying, okay, you see the one over there near the cactus? And he goes, yeah, I see him. Well, what's he doing? Well, he's moving to the left. They compared notes, and they realized that they were both seeing the same thing, and they were comparing notes, and they go, what about that one over there? Yeah, I see him. Look at you. Da, da, da. And in the meantime, more of them are coming out of the desert, and they completely encircle them. While they're doing this, they see this whole circle all around their truck, and they go, what the hell's going on? They jump in the truck and lock the doors, and these things keep moving in on them. And the guy said, all of a sudden, the back of the truck went down and recoiled like somebody dropped a ton boulder in there. The whole front of the truck went up, the back of the truck went down, and they're freaking. They're like, what is going on? And they turn around and they look in the back of the truck, and they said it was full of shadow people. So that got my attention too. It's like, if they could actually alter the physical condition of that truck, if they could make that truck recoil, what else could they do? You
have to get the book, Time Storms. There are so many instances where a car was lifted and then it was dropped. And these people reported things across time all over the planet. And there's instances where people are literally driving in their car. This time storm overtakes them. And next thing you know, the one guy woke up 300 miles away and a national park person found him walking in a trance, and his wife reported him missing. The police were looking, they found his car, and he wasn't there. He was on his way to a business meeting. He knew where he was going. Everyone knew where he was going. That's literally teleportation. That's what we're talking about. How does that happen? And there's just cases and cases like that in this book.
I've heard some airplane pilots that, all of a sudden would materialize somewhere hundreds of miles from where they were flying, just in an instant. And then they said it was like a circular thing of clouds that were just spinning.
And that, like, I call it atmosphere. It's like atmospheric quicksand. I mean, just think back in the day when humans didn't know about quicksand. You're walking through the forest, next thing you know, Tom's gone. You think the devil took him. Meanwhile, he's in the quicksand. It's like, these people were walking around. Next thing you know, they walk right into a time storm. And the one case in Missing 411 that is just horrible to me is this older man that was with a group of people. He has problems with his legs. So they're like, sit here on this rock. We'll go up there and we'll come back. Well, he's gone. Okay. And this isn't a scenario where they're way out. This was in Yellowstone Park, and it was in an area where there wasn't many places to hide. Okay. Like, you could find him. And two different people, both independently, heard a faint cry of "help me" from a man. One was a reporter who was at the national park, who was doing a story about something else, heard the commotion, came over. She's a reporter. She wants to see what's going on. She goes in the area. As she's walking around, she hears this faint "help me." She goes up to one of the rangers and is like, "This is really weird, but I heard this guy say "help me." Well, he turns white and he was like, "Yeah, I heard the same thing." But there's nowhere, Jerry, for this guy to be. He was literally in another dimension of space. And time storms is all about is she comes at it from a very scientific perspective, Randall's, and she feels this is natural earth phenomena that we don't understand. It's science we don't understand yet.
Well, they say everything is happening at the same time.
Yeah. And that would be a good example of it.
Yeah, because we're in the physical universe, everything is linear. But in the energetic universe where these entities operate, there is no time, there is no space, there is no matter. Everything, it's all happening right now.
But that goes along with it's a different time, it's a different space. These things come and go and live within that field, that it's like a different field to them. But I do want to go over real quick the physical symptoms. So we did the environmental symptoms of time storms, but I'm going to run through these and see if anything comes up in time. Go ahead.
Is this the patterns you're talking about?
No, I'm not in the patterns yet. We're going to get on that because I've got a half an hour. So we're going to use the last half hour to do the patterns. Right now, this is just I'm going to go over the rest of the time storms data that I have collected here. This is the physical symptoms. The witnesses reported feeling heavily medicated, and I call this darting. This is like when we dart an animal. We tag them, and it's like catch and release. So they feel heavily medicated, dizzy, dazed. They feel detached, isolated, disoriented, experiencing timelessness and weightlessness, which we talked about, tingling sensation on the skin, like goosebumps, sunburn. They get sunburns, they get rashes, they faint because of the pressure sometimes and the heat. They get nauseous. They have auditory and visual hallucinations in time storms, severe headaches, vomiting, exhaustion, sluggishness, amnesia, confusion, paralysis, and clumsiness. Those are all the things associated and reported by time storms victims. And it sounds like what some of your patients had to deal with.
Well, to some of it, the auditory and visual hallucinations.
And then feeling medicated, like you said, sometimes they would be drained. I mean, some of them that weren't medicated, maybe the draining would be more of a sedate, like a dizzy, dazed, sedated, because
it's like when you're really low energy.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of them were so drained they couldn't even get out of bed in the morning to go eat breakfast.
Yeah. Sluggishness and exhaustion.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Those two for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's good. I've always wanted to ask someone like you those questions to see if there was a comparison, because I actually do in my paper talk about this comparison between all this phenomena. It's good to have you corroborate that at least a little bit. But we can now get into the self-defense portion of the talk where you can go into detail about these patterns that you were able to document. And then some of the things that the voices say in case if somebody does have this certain repeating pattern in their brain, then we can probably give them hope that they're not crazy. I do have the list of patterns here. The first one is negativity.
That is the biggest overall one. It's like all the voices that these people hear are negative for the most part. They can fake like they're angels, but eventually,
the truth comes out.
The truth comes out. So the question is, if psychiatry would get off their butts and take a look at this stuff and start talking to these people instead of just medicating them ceaselessly, they would find that the voices are consistently, unswervingly negative.
Yeah, like derogatory, insulting, abusive, destructive, all of that.
Every negative thing you can think of consistently. So the question would be, is what is it that holds them to a consistently negative pattern? Why are they not random like hallucinations? Some of them positive, some of them negative, some of them neutral. Why are they what is it that holds them on that consistently negative path where they're always negative, they're always destructive? Something is doing that. They're not random, all these things, the patterns, they all fly in the face of what psychiatry is saying. And all these patterns are right there for them to look at. I've already listed them for them. The work is done. It's right here. All they got to do is open their eyes and look. The voices are anti-religious. They don't like the religion. I remember when patients started telling me that when they repeated the 23rd Psalms, a couple of them said that the voices reacted like worms thrown on a hot frying pan. Why would a hallucination do that? Why would a hallucination be anti-religious at all? And they'll say there is no God. You're wasting your time. I remember him telling one patient, Jesus couldn't even save himself. What makes you think he's going to save you? They don't want him reading the Bible. And it's interesting because some patients know that, one of the solutions is somewhere in the Bible. They just don't know how to get to it. So they determine, well, I'm going to read the Bible irrespective of what the voices say. And then the voices say, if you're going to read the Bible, you got to read it from cover to cover. You got to start at the beginning and read it all the way through. And then they get to that place in the Bible where this guy begat that guy, and it goes on for like 20 pages. And the voices jump in there and say, see, this is a bunch of bullshit. Why are you even wasting your time with this? And it's amazing how many of them they get to stop reading the Bible at that point. But they'll always say that. It's almost like they're all made from some cookie cutter where they're all programmed to do this same stuff. It comes pre-programmed.
That's what I talk about, the rules of engagement. They all purchase the same license where they can come in here and feed. They can't go off script. They can't go outside of the bounds of this license. Like when you're hunting, there's different types of hunting, pheasant hunting, doe hunting, and there's different rules of engagement and parameters that you have to follow. This is reminding me of this pattern is sink or swim, snatch and grab, catch or release. This is something else. We'll have to come up with a different name because this is more of just feeding.
These are, like what we're talking about, a magnet. You can't see that magnetic force. But if you get a jar with iron filings and you put that magnet up there, now you can see it, but you're not actually seeing the magnetic force itself. You're seeing its effect. And that's what these are. You can't see the voices themselves. You can't see these entities, but these are the effects they have on their victims. You can see that.
You're doing almost the exact same things that Jenny Randles did in Time Storm. She's showing you the effects and she's showing you the physical effects, the environmental effects, but she's like, I don't really know what this is. And sometimes it's moving, it's actual, has a consciousness, but it doesn't talk to you. It doesn't act like the missing 411 cases in the sense that it's deadly, but it's still destructive and it's still a phenomenon that's acting similar to, missing 411. You're all documenting these patterns of behavior and the way in which it filters through the human vessel.
They are deadly. Schizophrenics have a suicide rate of 3 to 5 times that of the normal population. I've seen the effects in the state hospital where one guy slit his wrist and he kept his mouth shut as the blood spurted all the way to the ceiling and he bled out. He didn't make a peep. They just found him dead in the morning. The voices got him to finally drove him to that point.
That's sad. It's really a shame. It's almost like some of them are soul hunters. They get you to that point where they've got you. And they're not only going to end your human existence, but they're going to take whatever's left.
Yeah.
It's almost like they were after his soul at that point, which is really sad if you think of it in that
well,
way.
they're all after, they can't get the person's soul, but they can, what they're after is to control the person's mind.
Mhm.
So they insert negative thoughts into the person's thought stream that sound just like your normal thoughts, but they're not your intent. You know, that's one of the ways you can tell the difference is this isn't my intent to do these kind of things. It's not my intent to beat somebody up or shoot somebody. And these voices are telling them to do that.
Yep.
You know, what they're after is the creation of that negative emotional energy.
Yep. That's the next one. Foster and create negative emotion.
And they will do anything to do that. There's no holds barred. You know, they have complete access to your memory. They can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done and rub it in your face until you start generating that negative emotional energy.
Yeah. And we've all had that. I don't get voices, but I'll get pictures. I'll get the movie that plays out, and it'll be of something stupid that I did when I was a kid.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a normal thing that a 7-year-old does. So it doesn't affect me because you have to go through those experiences as a child. If you're a human being, that's what happens. And so when I used Sherry's "That's a Lie," when I had that image come in, I finally realized how to use it. And I said to whatever it was around me, I said, you've never been human because you went through my memory like a Rolodex. You popped this out, you shoved it in my brain, you brought it up to the surface. But what you don't realize is that is a normal thing. That is a normal, embarrassing thing that every 6-year-old on this planet has probably, or 7, 8-year-old. So I understand that as a 46-year-old woman, that is normal behavior. That's part of the development process of a human being. And now I know you've never been human. So you think that's going to work, and it doesn't, because I'm a mature adult. I can outsmart that. And so there has been times where they've actually gone through the Rolodex and put in something that maybe happened in the corporate environment. I'm 20, 30 years old. Of course, everyone's going to do something stupid at one point in time. Let's be mature about this. Okay. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done it. Nice try again. It's not going to bother me because that is a normal thing that can happen in a corporate environment.
Yeah.
You know?
They try to get their claws in you, and they do that by capturing your attention. So what schizophrenia is, it's a spiritual battle for your attention. And they're trying to direct your attention to negative things.
To what they can then feed off of.
Yes.
Yeah. That leads into the next thing, with is energetically drain the victims.
Yeah.
Doing that constantly. So if I wasn't able to flip that switch after listening to you guys, doing this research, writing this paper, then it was like, oh, this is how this works. This is how the technology works. I can switch this on. I can switch this off. And so, you know, every once in a while it'll happen. And I remember what you guys teach people. And then I just say, you've never been human. That is a normal situation. I will not be held responsible for that because it's petty and it's stupid. And probably 1 million people have done it.
I think you'd find the interview that I just posted on YouTube with a fellow, he wanted to be called Anon. But he's a mechanical engineer now, but at the age of around 25, he had a complete psychotic break, was hospitalized for 4 weeks. And he's somebody I could put you in touch with too. Okay. So he was hospitalized for 4 weeks, and the voices were telling him something about something to the effect of you humans are disgusting. Your mouth is ugly, or da 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 da. And he reared back and he said, God gave me this mouth. Take it up with him. And they just shut up. So he was one of those ones that kept the voices at a distance, you know, because almost all of them struggle to figure out what these voices are. And if they believe that they are the voices, which the voices want, they want them to believe that the voices are who they are.
At first, you're just thinking that, this is you. This is you remembering something. You have to listen to somebody like you and somebody like Sherry so that you start, I have a background in martial arts. I used to teach self-defense classes when I was younger. The first thing you teach is how to change your mindset, to be aware of your surroundings. And all we're doing right now is teaching people how to be aware of your metaphysical surroundings. You have to take not only your environment, but now you have to stretch into your metaphysical environment. But people are smart. Once you realize, There's a metaphysical environment, whatever you want to call it, a matrix. Then McTaggart calls it the field. You know, Rupert Sheldrake, he has a name for it. All these people, they have different names for it. It's the same damn thing. Once you flip that switch in your mind, then you can start being aware of it. And then, you know, like you did, it takes you 7 years. You build up the awareness to it. Then the universe sends somebody to you and shows you these dark eyes.
It's been pretty much doing it.
And then next thing you know, so anyone, you know, we can all do this. You just have to flip that switch, start becoming aware of it. And then like you did, be mature about it. When something happens, don't dismiss it and have a rational conversation with yourself. Could this possibly be happening? Let's do what Sherry and Jerry tell me to do and test it for yourself.
That is one of the things I tested with Carlos Castaneda from the start, because things were getting weird at the state hospital. Castaneda is kind of strange himself, but what he wrote jived with me. I mean, I could feel it. And one of the things he said was that if something happens to you that doesn't fit with your conception of what reality is, you'll blot it out or forget it. You know, you just won't allow it to fit. And
that's like a reality's mechanism of keeping you in the state that you should be in, because you almost woke up too soon to something that you weren't. You know, like Carl Jung says, be aware of unearned wisdom. That's reality's way of protecting you from unearned wisdom, because you can go into a psychotic state if you get woken up too soon spiritually, especially when you're doing the kind of stuff that you're doing and what Carlos Castaneda is talking about. When you were on that spectrum and it's like, we're pushing Jerry along like this. Well, if you had seen those black eyes and that guy back here at like year 7, I don't know if you might not have pushed along as you did. But it's like reality kept you where, you know, it's going to meet you where you're at. These synchronicities and this type of alchemical, you know, initiation, it's going to meet you where you're at. It's going to keep you on path. It's going to send these things to you, like Carlos says, when it can. And when you can't handle something, it's going to wipe it.
That's where I learned to take notes. When something strange happened, to write it down somewhere, because if I didn't, I would lose it.
Okay, you got to make a book of this journal of notes. You got to find it, Jerry.
I've got story after story after story here, but
you've got to do a book on just stories, please. Come on, you can do it. You owe it to us.
I've got it like half done, and then after 2 years of working on this book, it was like, yeah.
Oh, I've been there. You know? I know.
But yeah, I got some amazing stories. I mean,
all right, I'm going to push you now that we're in contact. That book's coming.
Now, Sherry and you are both going to be on there.
Okay. So I've only got 10 more minutes. So let's hurry up. We'll go through these, and because I really want people to understand. So they get louder after sunset. That's pretty interesting. You know,
I was working in a, old folks place, geriatric center.
Yeah.
They called it sundowner syndrome. Where they would start getting crazy after sunset.
Does that happen in the dementia facilities too? The dementia, like Grandpa was in one, and at night they get day and nights messed up.
Yeah, they get crazy.
Yeah.
So the voices are the same thing. They get louder after sunset for some reason.
Did you notice this in the prison systems as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. This was a pattern you saw across.
Yes.
Hospital,
these are all
homes. Okay.
From the East Coast, from Georgia to Iowa to Arizona, irrespective of time or place or institution, all these patterns were going on in people that had never met one another ever.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. Then the next one is the voices get louder when ignored.
Right. And psychiatry will tell them, oh, just ignore them. They're hallucinations.
And it makes it freaking worse. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it worse.
Okay. Foster self-destructive behavior.
See, and that's one of the things that's really interesting, because the human being, the prime directive for the human being is to survive, to do things to survive and be happy. That's the prime directive. But in schizophrenia, that is turned around 180 degrees, and the mind turns on itself. It turns on the patient. It's no longer a survival mode. It's a destructive mode. And schizophrenics are some of the most self-defeating, self-destructive, destructive people on the planet.
Yeah. And that, that totally goes against life in general.
Yeah. You don't see dogs turning on themselves or biting themselves or doing things that are destructive.
The next one is foster isolation.
Yeah. They want the person isolated. They don't want anybody involved with them. They want them locked in their room by themselves, just them and the voices. They don't want mothers interfering. They don't want girlfriends,
no family,
no
friends,
family, no nobody.
Nothing.
They just want them by themselves. The worst thing you could do to a schizophrenic is isolate them.
Gotcha. And then, so that goes along with the next one, which is they want to demand the attention of them all the time. And we're talking about the parasites. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. And maneuver for increased control over the victims, which goes right along with all those other two things. Gaslighting, which goes along with it. Let's see, manipulating perception. That's interesting.
They manipulate perception. They'll take a neutral statement and turn it negative. Oh, those people are talking behind your back. And you look at the guys, they're talking, or, oh, those people are looking at you, and they start looking around.
Meanwhile, they're not even looking at you.
They're not looking at you.
They could be looking at something behind you.
Or talking about something totally different. They interpret and change perception that people are against you.
Okay. They have complete access to the schizophrenic's memory. We talked about that. They almost go through your Rolodex.
Yep.
And they can kind of push your buttons. Demand the victim not tell others about their presence.
Right.
Which is very easy to do.
And demand, they don't want to be discovered. They want to stay down under. So they tell them not to tell anybody about them at all.
Yeah. And that now, is this available on your website, all of these? Because we're not going to be able to get through all of, there's 20,
I think
28 or 29 of them. Okay. Because you sent this to me, but I'm pretty sure it is. I'm going to skip down to okay, this is a good one. Boredom is bad. An idle mind is the devil's playground. Right?
Yes,
there's that
exactly.
saying.
Exactly.
Okay. Selective forgetting. What the hell is that, Jerry?
Well, they do something and they forget it. They do something bad. They have no memory that they did it.
Oh,
especially
Susan Martinez talks about that.
Especially with psychotic killers. They go, I don't remember doing that.
Oh my God, you've got to read her book. Yeah, she has the transcripts of them either in court or being interrogated. And they're like, that was not me. You're thinking that they're just saying that, but they sound honest. They're like,
yes, they are honest.
Did not do that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
they didn't do it.
Yeah, the one serial killer was like, there's no way I could ever do that.
And how many times?
He was adamant.
How many times do you hear these guys go to court and say the voices told me to do it? So they send them to the prison.
Shit, I didn't put those two together. Okay, let's see. Destruction of positive self-concept. Okay, we kind of went over that one. Let's see. I'm gonna skip to, oh, this is a good one. Attempt to pull their victim away from consensual reality.
Yes.
That's an advanced one.
They try to suck them into their reality and their description of what reality is and what's going on, their description of what people are saying, their description of the interpretation of events.
Yeah, it's almost like they're becoming the interpreter for everything.
They want to be the interpreter for everything. Wow. They want control of that being, and they don't relent. They're relentless.
That's an advanced form of behavioral science. See, confusion as a means of instilling negative suggestions. We've talked about that. Aversion to anything positive or beautiful.
Yeah, they don't want them being happy. They don't want them doing anything enjoyable. They don't want them reading positive spiritual books. They don't want any happiness. They don't want the guy smiling, laughing, joking, none of that.
If you walked into their apartment, it's probably a mess and it's probably filthy. We can take this stuff literally. I try and keep my space very clean and organized. Everything has to have its place and has to have multiple purposes because I live in a small house. There's a reason for that, but that can transfer over into a metaphysical reason. I'm just trying to give an example to somebody who's not psychotic as a practical way, is that's a good idea to keep your house in order. It's like feng shui. You want to foster the movement of energy through your home and you want it to be positive. Keep things clean and tidy and organized. Would that be the place?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
All right, Jerry. Well, this was absolutely amazing. I know we didn't get into the actual things that they say, the patterns that you guys wrote down, but with Sherry, we listed a bunch of those at the very end of the call. If somebody listens to her, they're going to get everything. Do you want to let anyone know where they can contact you before we officially stop recording?
My website at jerrymarzinski.com.
Okay. And I'm going to get all that information from you and put it in the show notes. So you've got a website, your book is available.
You can order it through the website.
Okay.
Or you could order it through Amazon.
Okay.
But we got articles, we got testimonials, we've got stories,
You've got a ton of resources.
The videos.
Yeah. And then do you have a YouTube channel as well?
Yeah, I got a YouTube channel.
Okay.
It's on YouTube, it's on BitChute, it's on Rumble.
Okay.
We got all the videos are there.
Okay. You have so much information out there that you could just do a quick internet search and all of your interviews come up. I definitely look forward to staying in touch, and thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy, so I'm going to end the show right now, and thanks again, but stay on the line and we'll keep talking. All right. Bye everyone. Thank you.